I need to finish this thing, my Shaper milling head. Now I made a 4-part series about making this thing, and then I had another video when I fitted taper bearings. But I hadn't quite finished it because, firstly, I haven't checked the preload on the taper bearings. I'll explain in a moment. I think it's about right, but it needs to be checked. The second thing is, when I fitted taper bearings, I put them at both ends. Now at this top end here, the cup is held in place with a wave spring. Well, that wasn't such a good idea for taper bearings. I don't know why I didn't think it through properly, but you can imagine if this was under very heavy loads, it's trying to deflect the armature like this, and if it's only held in with a wave spring pressing on the cup on the taper bearing, you could imagine, there could be a bit of deflection. So I'm actually going to put the deep ball race bearing back in the top here. By the magic of Fusion 360, I've sectioned this motor. I'm going to put the ball race on here, take off the taper that's there at the moment. This is the badly drawn taper bearing. This is the end casing of the motor. This is a thrust bearing that sits outboard of this end casing, and this is my ER32 collet chuck. So basically we're sandwiching this web on the end casing of the motor between this thrust bearing and this taper bearing. So that should stop any float up and down this way. Now the preload is set on here by a washer in there and then a screw which tightens up and holds the chuck on, but there's also a couple of screws either side like this. So I think that spacing washer might be just a little bit too large, giving a little bit of too much free play. So what I'm going to do is take the end casing off from this end, and then I'll be able to measure, putting a dial gauge up here, the amount of end float that we get when we push up or pull on this chuck. This fan was quite loose on here, so I put a bit of silicone on the end. And now with a big screwdriver I can prise this off. Get this in here somewhere. There we are. Try not to drop these captive nuts out. Not so captive, captive nuts. Do not lose the wave washer. Where is it? Oh, there it is. It's on this cup, behind this cup here, so you can see it moves in and out. I don't want to take the whole motor to pieces, so I'm hoping I can just use this puller, which is popped off. It did start, hang on a minute. Now with added elastic bands, I still need to grip this though. The puller isn't even and it's pulling off to one side, but oops, the bearing is coming off, so if it works, it works. There we are. Good. Now then, when I fitted those taper bearings, I machined, I think it was 0.7 of a millimetre off here, off this collar, because the taper bearing was 0.7 thicker. So I might need to find a spacer to go on there. Got to think about that. Full marks to those of you that spotted that the bearing that I was talking about was not actually the right one. This is the correct one. I don't know where this came from. So just checking the amount of clearance on this taper bearing at the bottom here. I'm just pulling up and down on the chuck, but one thing to watch out for, look, as I rotate it, you can see what's happening there. Pulling down, pushing up, pulling down, pushing up. So yes, about 1/100th of a millimetre. I'm going to leave that as it is. Like I said, I machined 0.7 millimetres off this shoulder here when I put the taper bearings on. Now, to get that back again, I happened to have a brass washer. The hole in the middle was smaller than I needed, but I've drilled it out to 15 millimeters, and it will, when I push it in a minute, drop on there. Might need a bit of persuasion. But I just wanted to say, probably most people know this already, but this drill is a 1932, and I look for drills where we have an imperial which has a metric equivalent, and 1932 is near as, makes no difference, 15 millimeters, and I don't have a 15 millimeter drill. So I've been building up stocks of these equivalents for quite some time, and I got that one a few weeks ago, and you think, well, I'll get it, but when will I need it? And then, you know, guess what, in no time at all, I need it. So I'm going to try and get this bearing on like this. I don't want to take this motor off if I can avoid it. Where are we? Now, if this doesn't work, I do have a plan B. But let's see. So this is just like a big woodworking sash cramp type of thing. Let's try. Come on. Might need to do this and a tap. Well, I got it. I just needed to push this over a bit and line it up squarely, because this was just jamming as it was going down. So there we are. Just a little bit of grease where the seal goes. A little bit of silicone on this to stop it rattling. Not so much as I can't get it off next time. Well, with that taper bearing end float check and changing this taper bearing for a ball bearing, I now declare this Shaper milling head officially finished and operational.